Hello and welcome back to my Dandelion Diaries. I am continuing on with season 2 of the ink explorations, and as voted again in the community poll, we are going to be doing orange inks today, getting on our sunset vibes. And I have to say, I'm very excited for this color family today because I am hoping to find my orange ink that I want to use this month of June. So we shall see what ends up being the decision maker. As for supplies, I have my A5 Hobonichi notebook here with the original Tomoe River paper. I'm going to be using my sample holder that I got from Priscilla. Thank you. This is by Olive Frogs Designs. They have a whole bunch of different colors, actually. They're really cool, and I really want to order some more of them. I have my stamp block here. This is a mini acrylic stamp block that I used to make the swatches, a pipette, Kakimori brass dip nib with the aluminum handle, t-shirt, jars of water, just the stuff that I have normally been using as of late. I am going to be doing 20 inks today. I have 18 samples in 2 bottles, so hopefully we'll find, like I said, that ink that I would love to be using in June. First up, we have Robert Oster's Peach. And this ink is a lovely, lovely yellow-orange, like warm orange color. It's very much yellow lean to it, but there is a little bit of red to it as well. It's a really beautiful shade. It is dark enough that I can read it at least in a medium nib pen, which is what I've used it in before. But I will say this is a very light colored ink, and it may end up being the winner because this is kind of the color that I am looking for, which kind of is funny that it's the first one off the bat. Anyways, as for shading on this, it does have very minor shading, but mostly it's just kind of a halo-y situation. The way it's swatched kind of failed with swiping off the end of the page, so hopefully we'll get some of that cool ringing going on. But again, we'll wait for the dried swatch to really compound that. Next, we have an ink that was sent to me by a viewer, and this is Troublemaker's Mango. And I personally have not put this in a pen yet, but the color of this is a nice kind of yellow-orange again with a little bit of red, like a red undertone. Troublemaker as a brand is definitely on the drier side of inks, so I would probably end up putting this in one of my wetter pens, like my Esterbrook Estes or like a Twisby or something like that. I would definitely say that the color is beautiful and orangey and pretty reminiscent of a really nice ripe mango, but it does have little bits of red in it that is not really fitting what I want for June. But I'm not going to make this all about like how I'm picking my color for June, I guess, but this is just a really nice shading ink in a way. Like, I don't know how else to describe it right now while it's still wet, but it's got some cool properties to it. It's just a little bit drier because the Troublemaker inks in general are just a little bit drier. Next, we have DeAtramentis Mahatma Gandhi. And this is another one of those lovely yellow-orange inks. Honestly, kind of tempted to do this one for June too, but we'll see. The only thing that I have in particular with this ink over like the other DeAtramentis inks that I truly love is that it is a bit light, and I don't find it does well in anything less, like anything smaller than a medium nib. But as for DeAtramentis as a brand, they are totally in my top 5 ink brands out there in the world, at least that I've tried, and it's because their inks flow incredibly well. They are wetter inks. They do have a bit more of a loose consistency to them, but whenever I put them in a pen, they just perform outstandingly. I've never had like skipping or issues with it drying out in a pen. It's just a really nice consistency. The next ink I have here is by Laban, and this is part of their Greek mythology line, and it's Apollo Orange. So the color of this is a nice wishy-washy orangey color. It's very like melted popsicle to me. I like this ink because of the name. My dog's name is Apollo, so having an ink named Apollo is kind of cool to me, but I don't really reach for this ink just because it is a little too washed out when I want an orange. I would definitely say that the Laban brand is pretty limited in their color range, but they do have some really cool ones out there. Their Aphrodite from this line, or their Zeus Purple from this line, is also really pretty. And then I think they have a Demeter Brown that's pretty standard if you just want a nice brown. But overall, the ink is not super interesting. It's just got a nice muted, washed out, like melted popsicle orange vibe to it. Next up, we have 3 Oysters Hwangto. And this ink is a lot like the Troublemaker Mango, but wetter, like a lot wetter. I like the color of this. It has a nice yellow-orange base with a little bit of a red thing going on too, but overall I don't really reach for this one, and I don't really know why. I've talked about Three Oysters a few times now in these second season of ink videos, and they are a wetter brand. They have really cool ink bottles that have a corner cut that you can tilt them on their sides, but they are, I don't know, they're not as exciting. Like, they have some inks that are really cool, but most of their inks are just kind of like, meh, it's okay. Some of my favorites from this brand though are definitely Delicious Mustard, which is like a yellowy ochre color, and then also their I Color You Duldum, which is a gray with chroma shading. But this one in particular, Hwangto or Hwangto, is a nice yellowy orange with a little bit of a redness going onto it as well. And after that we have a Scribe ink, and this is called Arancio di Sicilia. And I do want to apologize for any pronunciation errors I make in these videos. I do try to listen to the names before I pronounce them, but I'm not the best at it. But as for the color of this, it is a nice kind of in the middle medium orange color. I don't remember if this one has sheen in it or not, but the flow of this ink is really quite nice. It is almost like a satiny feel, kind of like the Tasha inks, but it's not quite that good. As for the brand itself, I find this brand to be a little bit more on the expensive side, kind of to match like the price range of their pens, if you ask me, but they do have several colors and a lot of their inks do have some really cool properties. But like I said, I don't quite remember how this one dries totally down, so I'll wait to do final talk about that when it's totally dry. Next, we have one of my favorite oranges, and this is Wearingeul Heimdall. And this ink is one of my favorites because it has some really cool properties when it's fully dry, but I'll wait to talk about those once it is dry. I do want to talk about Wearingeul as a brand for a minute, just because I am trying to incorporate a lot of brands when I do these videos now, because, you know, sometimes brands are better priced in other areas. But Wearingeul has a lot, like 1,020,000,020 different colors to choose from. They have a lot of their inks based in literature books or really famous authors, which I think is really cool considering you're most likely going to write with these inks. Anyways, but a lot of their inks have different consistencies. So some of their inks are really wet, some of their inks are really, really dry, and other inks are kind of just like a nice in the middle batch. Heimdall is in the middle. It's not super dry, but it's not super well flowing either. So take with that what you will. I will say a lot of their colors that are darker have better flow, and a lot of their lighter colors are a bit more dry, but it does just depend individually on the color, unfortunately. So if you're unsure, try to get a sample of Wearingeul before you buy a bottle, just because you don't want to be stuck with an ink that you're not really comfortable with. Next up, we have Kobe number 25, and this is Tarumi Apricot. And this ink has quite an interesting color dynamic to it. It has almost like a pinkness to it, like almost to a corally lean or a reddish pink lean, but it is pretty firmly still orange. I don't know, this one's kind of one of those inks that like you have to really see it to understand what I'm talking about. Based on the viewfinder, it's looking pretty close to a salmon color, but in person it's still really orange while it's wet. So like I said, it's really dependent on the viewer for this one. I personally love that this color is super unique. I don't really think I have another color quite like this in terms of the like actual color of it, like the shade of it. But the properties of the Kobe ink is one that I will leave for a surprise. Next, we have another one of my favorite oranges, and this is Kaweco's Sunrise Orange. And this is one of my favorites because it has a little bit of a brown / red thing going on with it. I don't know, the shading is really cool. I've talked about Kaweco again a few times in these videos now. They are a wonderful brand, but they are very limited in colors. I find that their inks are pretty medium flow, like not super wet, not super dry, but pretty consistent throughout. I love that they offer almost all of their colors in cartridges, because if you ever have owned a Kaweco pen or written with a little Kaweco Sport or something like that, having a cartridge holds a lot more ink than the converters that go in those pens. And after that, we have number 16 by Akkerman, and this is Orange Boven. And this is a beautiful reddish orange color, almost so far red that it could be considered like a light scarlet, I would think. Maybe vermilion is a really good color for this. It is kind of bright too. It has a bit of a brightness, a bit of a saturation to it that's really nice as well. I think close to the neighbors on the page. The Kobe 25 is the closest, but the Kobe 25 still has that little bit of pink going on with it that totally separates it from the Akkerman 16. But orange-wise, this is orange. It is definitely a good orange, if a little bit red orange in some places. Next up, we have an ink that's probably, I don't know, this one may not actually be considered orange to some. This is Inkebara Coral. And the reason why I say it may not be orange to some is because this is kind of more of a pink leaning color. So for me personally, I consider coral to be in the orange family just because it's usually a mix of like orange, reds, and pinks. And to me, they don't really fit in red and they don't really fit in pink. So I always put them in orange. That's just me. So for this ink, technically it might be more pink to some, but to me it's still orange. The shading in this is really nice. It does have almost an orange shade to it when it dries completely. And as for Inkebara as a brand, I find that they have quite a few colors, at least that I've seen, and the flow of these inks has been really nice, if not maybe a little dry in some areas. And after that, we have another ink that might be considered a little bit more on the pink side, and this is Octopus Fluids Orange Skunk. And Octopus Fluids is kind of a newish brand to me. I've tried a few of their inks, but every ink that I've tried from them is definitely very wet, very well flowing. This ink too is a part of their Write and Draw series, which means I believe that it has pigment, aka it is waterproof, which is also really cool because finding a bunch of different colors in waterproof ink is honestly a challenge. And I don't think I've ever seen a waterproof ink this color. And on that note, the color of it is definitely more of a pinky orange. It definitely has some cool like shifting going on with it. I'll talk more about that when it dries completely, but the color is definitely more on the pink orange side versus the orange side or the red orange side. I still put it in this family because I find that pink and corally, like orangey pink colors, coral colors fit here better. So up to viewer discretion on this one, but I still want to put this in the orange family. And after that, I have the only shimmer ink that I'm going to be including, and this is Van Diemen's Seashell Shimmer. And I want you to say that 3 times fast. Seashell Shimmer, okay. Anyways, it's definitely a tongue twister. The color of this ink is a beautiful warm orange, definitely more like medium orange, not light or anything, but it does have a yellow lean to it. And the shimmer in it is pretty much a orange color too. It's pretty orange on orange, you know? Van Diemen's as a brand is really nice. I've tried a few of their inks. I actually have one of their inks inked up for June already, and I do like the consistency of Van Diemen's, and I think they have a whole bunch of colors, and I love that they have a lot of themed inks, so they have collections that have different themes, which I find really nifty, and I do think the artwork on their bottles is really cool as well. Next, we have a new ink to the Sailor Manyo line. This is part of the 5 that got released, and this is Himeyuri. And this is a beautiful red-orange color. It does have a bit of a sheen from what I remember. I haven't, again, written with this one yet because it is still fairly new to my collection, but I am really enjoying this color because it is kind of like the, actually the next ink I'm going to swatch, but it is a bit more of a reddish orange color, but not so far red that it looks red and not so far orange that it looks orange. It's a good in the middle ink for that. Sailor as a brand, like I talked about a little bit earlier with the Kobe, has 1,020,000 colors going on with it. They have so many different lines of inks. The only thing that I really find with them is that they are a bit pricier for the quantity that you're getting, but they are really good quality inks. But the color that's probably closest to the Sailor Manyo Himeyuri is one of my favorite oranges, and that is KWZ's Grapefruit. And this ink is definitely more on the red-orange side, but when it dries down, it has a little bit of shading going on with it, and I love that about it. I do want to talk again about KWZ as a brand, which I do every time I mention this brand, is they do have a scent to their inks. It is kind of a vanilla to sweet smell, so if you are sensitive to smells, just keep that in mind. The ink smells when it's wet. Once it's dry, the smell goes away. But when you write with it, it's gonna smell. Color though, like I said, is definitely a beautiful red orange, has gorgeous shading, and I just love the flow of KWZ inks. They just have a really nice flow to them. Not as wet as DeAtramentis, but not as like dry, I guess, as Troublemaker. I don't know, they have a good in-between like flow, but still a little bit more on the wet side. And on that note, here is one of the bottles of inks that I'm going to be swatching, and that is Birmingham Pen Company's Tiger Lily. And the color of Tiger Lily is definitely more of a warm orange. But when I say this ink is saturated, I mean it is saturated. It is so just full coverage, like, yes. And this does have a really cool green sheen to it as well, and just overall a really fun orange ink. I do want to talk about Birmingham Pen Company. Since they are a US brand, they do only ship in the US, which I'm just hoping for the day they ship international, but it's okay. But the inks themselves, all of them I have ever tried, and I have several bottles from this brand now, are very well flowing, very well behaving, just really, really cool inks. This ink in particular is actually part of their line of inks called the Atom Inks, and you can mix their Atom Ink collection together to form other colors that they sell on their website, which is really, really cool. And so I may or may not have an entire spreadsheet of all the inks that I'm going to make. Next up, we have Diamine Autumn Oak. And I'd say this is probably one of Diamine's more popular orange colors. I personally think it's really nifty because it's got some really cool like shading going on with it, but I don't always find it to be orange. I find it actually to be almost brown sometimes. It just depends. But the color of this is a really cool, neat, like unique color. It has almost a yellowness to it, almost a brown to it, and then again that kind of orange in the shading. It's just really dynamic. I also find that this ink looks totally different on different papers that you try it on, so just take this swatch with a grain of salt, because if you don't use tomoe over paper, it's probably not going to look the same. Next up, we have another more brownish orange, I guess, and this is Colorverse's Alpha Taurus. And like I said, this is definitely one of those more brown orangey colors, and I do enjoy this one, but I think it reminds me a lot of Ancient Copper and the next ink I'm going to be swatching. So it's, I don't know, it's up in the air for me on this one. I myself am a Taurus, and that is why I picked up a sample of this, but it's so close to the other inks that I don't think it's worth a bottle to me, just because the price of Colorverse is a little bit on the higher end side. Which, on that note, Colorverse as a brand has, again, 1,020 different colors to choose from. A lot of their inks are based on constellations and stars, which is really cool, very galactic, celestial even, very, very cool and nifty in that way. But their ink bottles are little round, like dewdrop looking things, and they have a few sizes, and they are a bit more on the expensive side, like I talked about. And again, an ink that's kind of similar to its neighbor. This is Dominant Industries Ginger Chicken, which is a Wonderpens exclusive, and this sample was sent to me by Allison, so thank you, Allison. And again, the color of this is more of that red, orange, brown kind of situation. I do want to mention that since this is a Wonderpens exclusive, you can only get it from Wonderpens, which is located in Canada. And I do find that they go out of stock very, very regularly. So definitely check to see if you really want this one. The flow of Dominant Industry inks I find to be really great, very wet, very nice. I've had a lot of commentary saying that it's more on the dry side for them. So I don't know if this is just my experience, but I haven't had a dry experience with Dominant Industry. I will say their shimmer inks do tend to be a bit drier than their like standard ones. And the last ink that I want to include is actually one that is not on the market yet as of this video. This is Ferris Press's Terracotta Canyon. This will be releasing on June 7th of 2024, and it definitely does fit in the nice orange category we have going on right now. And this ink is definitely a very unique color. I actually don't think I have anything else in my collection that is this color. First of all, the reason I have this ink is because I am part of the Ferris Press Jubilee Ambassador Program, so I do get their inks a little bit early so I can review them for you guys. If you want to save some money on Ferris Press, I will have a discount code in my description. You can also use my Atlas discount code and save money there too. Really, if you just want the ink and you want to save some money, the links are there for you if you want them. As for this ink in particular, the reason why it is so unique, at least for me, is because of the shading. This is like gray and orange had a baby, and I don't really know how else to describe it. It definitely has a very warm desert sand like feel, like if you were to go to the Grand Canyon and see the big red rocks, like it's kind of orangey red like that, but it also has a bit of a grayness to it, like a real stone, like stone rock kind of situation. I don't know, this one really surprised me when I was sent it. I was like, whoa, this is really, really nifty. Okay, I'm gonna let these finish drying all the way down. I'll come back probably in like 20-ish minutes and see how we're doing. And then I'll zoom in, do close-ups of all the inks we have on these pages. And then I'll also flip back to the previous orange ink explorations I did last year, just so we can compare in case I have anything that's super similar. But I will see you guys in a minute. Okay, I am back. Everything has completely dried down, so I'm going to zoom in, do some close-ups, and then we'll review last year's orange inks as well. So starting off, we have Robert Oster's Peach. A little bit disappointed with my swatch since it kind of like fell off the page over here. You can kind of see the little bit of haloing that I was talking about in the beginning of Robert here, where the ink pooled really hard because of the pen, but it does have this really cool like reddish halo thing going on with it. But it's not so strong. Like it's still pretty light in an orange sense. Color of this is definitely more of a yellow orange. Peach is a really good name for this one in my opinion. I think this is the one that I'm going to go with for June and what I want to ink up with, because this is fitting kind of the vibe that I was going for. But this is a really nice yellowy orange ink and it is legible. I have written with it before in a medium nib and it was fine. So yeah. Then we have Troublemaker's Mango. Love the shading in this one. It's really unique. It does have a very minor red sheen going on with it. Like I talked about with Troublemaker inks before, they are a bit on the drier side, so just keep that in mind. But the color of this is really nice and has really cool shading. Then we had DeAtramentis Mahatma Gandhi, and I like this one, but I find it is just really light and fine to extra fine nibbed pens. I think this would do really cool in like a broad, and it would definitely show more of the orange, but the smaller nib size you get, the more yellow it comes out, which is kind of cool. But the consistency of DeAtramentis is definitely one of my favorite consistencies for inks. Then we had Laban Apollo Orange. Like I talked about with this one, it is kind of a washed out orange color. It's very muted in some areas. It does have a little bit of shading going on with that kind of reddish halo, and it is more towards a true orange color. This is honestly a really good like sunset orange color to me. It reminds me of a very washed out version of like Diamine's Pumpkin too. Then we have Three Oysters Hwangto, and this one is really cool with the shading, much like the Troublemaker Mango, but it does have sheen. So the sheen on this one is kind of like a reddish color, and it's very matte. It's not oil slick at all, but very nice, very cool. I think it would be better than Troublemaker's just because the Troublemaker is really dry and Three Oysters is really wet. But honestly, I wonder if you like mix the two of them together, since the colors are so similar, if you would get like a little less sheen and a little better flow. I don't know, things to ponder. Then we had Scribe's Arancio de Sicilia. Again, my pronunciation may be failed on that one, but the shading in this is really nice. It does have a very minor red sheen that I, like I said, couldn't remember if it sheened or not, but it is very minor red sheen. It's not super strong. It's just kind of like on the haloing parts. Shading wise, it technically does shade because it goes from a lighter orange to a bit more of a red orange, but it's not strong enough that I would really consider it to be shading in like writing with a pen and pages of it kind of thing. Then we had Wearingeul Heimdall, one of my favorite oranges, just because of the shading in this one's really cool. It actually goes from a kind of like nice yellowy orange color, almost this peachy color up here, to this darker reddish orange with red haloing. Really nice. Like I talked about with Wearingeul, some of their inks are really dry and some of their inks are really okay. This is definitely one of their more okay ones. And then we had Kobe number 25, Tarumi Apricot. I really like this one. I don't know if the camera is going to really pick up the pinkness that it has, but in the little bits of shading, it has kind of a pink vibe going on with it. It's like the opposite of Sailor Manyo Sakura. So like this is more orange with a little bit of pink versus pink with a little bit of orange. I like this one. It's really cool, really fun. Definitely a unique color too. And by that, I mean it has pink in it versus like the base of this one, Akkerman Orange Boven. These colors are very close, but the little bit of pink in this one changes the writing. So yeah, and it's hard to show on camera, but they are different, but just slightly. Akkerman 16's Orange Boven does have a very minor yellow sheen going on with it in some cases. You might be able to see the tiny bit of it up here, but the shading is pretty much just not there. It's pretty much a solid color all the way through, and it is very saturated. It is a nice, juicy, pigmented orange color. It does not have pigment in it, it's made with dye, but it's very saturated in the terms of that it's flat all the way across. Then we had Inkebara's Coral. Like I talked about, this is maybe considered pink to some, but I usually put the corals in my orange family, so I'm definitely going to leave this one in here. The shading in this is beautiful. It goes from like a light, almost dusty coral color to a bit more of a reddish pink. It does have a little bit of a sheen as well, but nothing strong enough that I think it really shows up other than in swatches. And like I said, might be considered more pink to some. It's kind of a nice rosy corally color. I don't know. I still put this in the orange. And then we had Octopus Fluid's Orange Skunk, which is a pigment ink. This is part of the Write and Dry series and definitely looks, again, more on the pink side compared to everything else here. And that's because it is more on the coral orange side. The shade of this is, I don't really know how even to describe it. The name does not help me whatsoever with it being Orange Skunk. It's such a unique name. But the color is, I guess, kind of like an orange pink. I don't know. It's light though, so there's that. I personally have not put this in a pen yet, so I can't really speak to how it looks in writing, but in swatching it definitely is legible, at least with the dip pen. And the flow on these is really quite juicy, so I think you'd have a good experience with a finer nibbed pen. It just may be a little bit light. Then we had the only shimmer ink, and this is Van Diemen's Seashell Shimmer. Again, say that 5 times fast, geez. But it is this beautiful true orange color with a very minor yellow lean, and it does have orange shimmer. It is very, very pretty. I personally don't reach for this one just because I don't really have a need for orange shimmer all that often, which is why I only really have one on this page. But anyways, the color of this is really quite lovely, and I like the consistency of the Van Diemen inks too. Then we had Sailor Manyo, I think it's Himeyuri, which is their new ink for the Manyo line. They had 5 new ones come out, and this is one of them, the orange one. It does have a little bit of red shading going on with it and a very minor kind of darker red sheen. Not something so strong that I think it would show up really well, but it is very, very nice. Flow is really good, and it definitely is more on the red-orange side. I honestly thought this was really close to one of my favorite orange inks, and that is KWZ Grapefruit, but putting them side by side, they are not at all the same, which I actually can appreciate. KWZ's Grapefruit was the next one I did, and it is definitely more of a red-orange. The shading in this is really nice, and it does have kind of a reddish sheen going on too. I actually had this inked up in May, so if you're interested in how that went, just check out my currently inked video for May. But yeah, this consistency of KWZ ink is really nice, really well flowing, and it does have a scent, so if you're sensitive to smells, again, keep that in mind. Then I had Birmingham Pen Company's Tiger Lily, which you can see, hopefully, the green sheen that's on this. It's not so strong, but in writing, it does show up, and it is shiny. It's like oil slicky. I do want to again mention that this is part of their Atom Ink line of inks, so if you mix this ink with other inks in their Atom Ink collection, you can create inks on their website based on the recipes they have, which it's just so fun. So fun. Then we had Diamine Autumn Oak. Again, this is such a unique orange color. The shading in it is just really cool. It goes from like this light tannish orange brown to a more of a dark tan orange brown. It's a very cool shading ink. If you haven't tried Autumn Oak, give it a shot. But if you're looking for one that's a bit more orange by Diamine, Diamine Flame is really good from the 2022 green ink vent. And then also Diamine Pumpkin are probably my top 2 other Diamine oranges. Pumpkin has red shading to it as well. Then we had Colorverse Alpha Taurus. Nice orange, red, brown color. It is really cool. It has some nice shading going on with it, a little bit of haloing. I like the color. It definitely fits the Taurus vibe, in my opinion. But I definitely think this is really close to Diamine Ancient Copper, which I'll flip to in season 1, but also close to Ginger Chicken. So if Ginger Chicken didn't have the black sheen, these two would be the same color, in my opinion. Like in writing, you can kind of see how similar they are versus like the swatches. Like, yeah. But Dominant Industries Ginger Chicken is part of a Wonderpens exclusive. It does have a black sheen, like I mentioned, and the shade of this is definitely, again, that kind of orange, red, brown color. It's really pretty. Honestly, if I were to pick Ancient Copper or Ginger Chicken, I would pick Ginger Chicken. It's just so pretty. I feel like the color palette is a bit more saturated, a bit richer to it as well. And then we ended off with Ferris Press's Terracotta Canyon, which this will be releasing on June 7th, June 7th, 2024. And it is just the most unique orange I have ever seen before. Like, I don't even know. Like what I said earlier, if orange and gray had a baby, this is what they would have. At least on the Tomoe River paper, it has this gray chroma shade to it. On Rodeo paper, the gray does not come through as strong. So it depends, again, on the type of paper you like to write on. I think this is really cool. It is really dry, but it's definitely a very interesting, dynamic orange ink, for sure. Flipping back to the previous orange explorations I did, this was the first one I did, which was more of just like the yellow-orange side of things. Ancient Charms Moonlight on the West River is actually kind of close to Van Diemen's Seashell Shimmer. It's just more yellow. And then we also had, I guess I already did swatch Mahatma Gandhi. Oh well, there's that one again. Lamy Mango is another really good yellow orange that I like. It is light though, keep that in mind. And then Noodler's Southwest Sunset, previously known as Apache Sunset, is actually one of the Noodler's inks that I quite enjoy. It has really good consistency, it does dry, and the shading on it is really cool. It's just, I don't know, I don't really like Noodler's enough to do anything else with it. I will say that Sailor Manyo Yamabuki is probably one of my favorite yellow oranges just because it has this kind of like a pink sheen thing going on with it. And the shading in it's really cool as well. And then if we move on to another orange one I did, this is probably where most of my favorites are. So here's Diamine Flame that I talked about instead of the Diamine Autumn Oak. So if you wanted like a true orange, Diamine Flame's a really good one. And then Monteverde's Fire Opal is another one of my favorites. Tacha Kawaime is another one of my favorites. And this one has like a greenish black sheen going on. Dominant Industries Earl Grey Tea is fantastic. Robert Oster's Penchale Exclusive Sunburn's really good. Sailor Shikiori Kin Mokuse is really good. Yuyak is really good. This is like probably my favorite oranges on one page, if I'm being honest. And then this was the last one I did, which here is Ancient Copper. So it's got a little bit of shimmer from this side of the page, but Ancient Copper and then Ginger Chicken. So you can kind of see how close they are together. Like Ancient Copper is a bit more red, I guess, and then Ginger Chicken's a bit more brown, but they're really, really quite close. I personally think Diamine Terracotta is better than Ancient Copper in this page, but Ginger Chicken beats all of those. Australos Oak is another one that I think is really interesting, even though it's a bit more brown. And then Pilot Iroshizuku's Fuyugaki or Winter Persimmon is probably one of my favorite like dark coral inks of all time. I have a full bottle of this one actually, and I really do enjoy that one. Overall, there are a lot of orange inks out there, so if there's any that I didn't swatch today or didn't talk about that you really love, please leave them down in the comments. I always love to find different inks that you guys suggest and try them out for myself or see how the community responds to your suggestion. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this ink exploration. Stay tuned for my community polls, as always, where we will hopefully decide what color we are going to do next. We've actually done quite a few already, and we're halfway through the year, so I'm excited to see how far we can get this year, if we make it through all the colors or not. Anyways, again, thanks for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.